I would like to thank Narada. At the outset, I would like to thank Narada Ganasabha and Mr. Krishna Swami in particular, and also my friend Vijay Lakshmi for inviting me over here this evening for this program. Needless to say, for any historian, Thanjavur will occupy the pride of place. There is no more historic place we can find in Tamil Nadu than Thanjavur. I will go straight to the topic because I have so much to say and so little time to say this in. I'm sure you're all very surprised to see a Perumal photo on the screen rather than the Thanjai Periya Kovil. But I have decided this evening to start with some lesser known temples and then go on to the big temple in Thanjavur, because if one starts talking about the Brihadeeswara temple, time will fly and we won't be able to talk about anything else. So, Thanjavur is home to one of the Divya Deshams, which means that it is home to one of the Vishnu temples that has been praised by the Alvars or the Vaishnavite saints. That's common knowledge. But in Thanjavur, what we have are 3 Vishnu temples which are clubbed together as one single Divya Desham, and they have been sung about by 3 Alvars, and I'll come to that a little later. Now, the temples are referred to as the Thanjai Mamani Kovil. That's the clubbed term, and there are 3. The first is the Thanjai Mamani Kovil, and you are seeing Neelamegha Perumal over here, seated and facing east, with Sri Devi and Bhudevi flanking him on either side. This is the Moola Vigraham. This is the main stone image, and in many temples you don't see the main deity with Sri Devi and Bhudevi. It is the Utsava Murti that you see with his consorts. So it's not rare, but it's not too common. And the goddess here, which Vaishnava goddess Lakshmi is generally referred to as Tayar, here in this Thanjai Mamani Kovil, she is called Senkamanavalli Tayar. And the Vimanam, a Vimanam, for those who are not aware of architectural terms, a Vimanam is the superstructure above the Garbhagriha, or above the Karuvarai, or the main sanctum sanctorum. And in every Vishnu temple, the Vimanam has a specific term. And here it is called the Saundarya Vimanam. For example, in Srirangam it's called the Pranavakara Vimanam, in Tirumala it's called the Ananda Nilaya Vimanam, here it's a Saundarya Vimanam. Every Vishnu temple has the specific name for the Vimanam, the superstructure above the god. And here it is said, in the Thanjai Mamani Kovil, the Lord appeared in response to the prayers of Parashara Muni or Parashara Rishi. Now here you have an outstanding image, and I've been very, very lucky to get all these photographs. These are the main deities, the Moola Vigrahams of all these temples. Usually you can get only pictures of the Utsava Murtis, and I have to thank a very good friend of mine called Sri M. N. Srinivasan, who painstakingly got it and has shared it with me. This is the second of the Divya Deshams. There's only one Divya Desham, the second of the temples, and this is Thanjai Yari Kovil. The Moolavar is, so obviously, Narasimha Swami, and he is in a seated posture here, and in a very unusual seated posture facing east. The goddess Lakshmi, Tayar, here is Thanjai Nayaki. What a beautiful name this is, Thanjai Nayaki. And the Vimanam is Veda Sundara Vimanam, above the main god. Actually, even when we go to this temple, we don't get such a close-up view of the god there. The third one, and I'm sorry that it is so black, but this is the best that we could do, is Manikundra Perumal temple. And the Moolavar is Manikundra Perumal, sitting and facing east. Tayar is Ambujavalli, the Vimanam is Manikuda Vimanam, and the god here is said to have appeared in response to the prayers of Markandeya Maharishi. Now what is interesting is that the Utsava Murtis, that is the processional metal image that is taken out during Utsavams, in all 3 temples is called Sriman Narayana. Now why I am so specifically mentioning this is because, again in Vishnu temples, in most Vishnu temples, I correct myself, the Moola Vigraham has a different name and the Utsava Vigraham has a different name. For example, if we go to Tiruvallikeni, it's so easily called the Parthasarathi Swami temple, but how many of us realize that it's the Utsava Murti who is Parthasarathi and the Moolavar is Venkata Krishna. And it goes on like this. It is there for Sri Rangam also. The Moolavar is Ranganatha Swami, the Utsavar is Azhagiya Manavalan or Namperumal. So here, in all these three temples, I've given you the names of the Moolavars, and the Utsava Murti in all three is Sriman Narayanan, which would be a four-armed Utsava Murti, flanked by Sri Devi and Bhudevi. Now, who are the Alvars who have sung about the Thanjai Divya Desham? They are Bhudatalvar, Nammalvar and Thirumangai Alvar. I am fully aware that as a historian, I will have to date the Alvars. We treat them as historical personages. I am also fully aware that I will be hurting the religious sentiments of certain people if I do this. But since in history we are able to do it, I think I should. Now, Bhudatalvar, I am not dating, it has been dated by many historians very many years ago. Bhudatalvar is said to belong to the 5th century AD. Nammalvar around the 7th or 8th, and Thirumangai Alvar definitely belongs to the 8th century AD because he lived in the reign of a Pallava king called Nandivarman II Pallavamalla. Now, all the three Alvars have been to Thanjavur and have sung about this Divya Desham, which means that though we are giving the Thanjavur Brihadeeswara temple such a pride of place, it richly deserves so, but Bhudatalvar of the 5th century, having gone to the Thanjai Mamani Kovil and sung about it, makes it a temple that is so many years older than the Brihadeeswara temple in Thanjavur. And the other thing, I would like to read the English translation of Bhudatalvar's hymn, and he says, it's very moving. The places which are fit for Perumal, who destroys the enemies of his devotees, are, first of all, the minds of the devotees. Second is the Thanjai Mamani Kovil. Then Talayarangam, that is Sri Rangam. And then Thirutanka in Kanchipuram, Thiruvengadam, Thiruparkadal, Thirumamalapuram, Thirukovalur, and Thirukudandai. Thirumamalapuram gets special mention in Bhudatalvar's hymns because he was born there. He was a native of Kadal Mallai or Mamallai, that is today's Mamalapuram. Thirumangai Alvar, in his Periya Tirumoli, says, "O you faithful devotees, I have learnt that the secret effective mantra which will enable us to attain eternal bliss is to pray to the Lord at Thanjai Mamani Kovil, which place is full of scented groves." I know, it sounds so much better in Tamil, and you will hear the singer of the evening, Vijayalakshmi Subramaniam, sing Thirumangai Alvar's Pashuram on this Divya Desham for you. Now we go on to another temple in Thanjavur, which again is not as famous as the Brihadeeswara temple, but it is so sacred. This is the Bangaru Kamakshi Amman temple. And I do not have a photo of that, but I am showing you a picture of Shyama Shastri, who was so closely associated with this temple. Now you are all, I think, perhaps familiar with the history of this temple, but it will definitely bear repetition. We all know of the famous Kamakshi Amman Kovil in Kanchipuram. And it is said that during a time of great strife and calamity, when the people of Kanchi were anticipating a Muslim invasion of this sacred city, they very quickly moved the golden Utsava Murti of Kamakshi Amman away. They literally had to run, as many people have run from many cities to safeguard their Utsava Murtis. And it is said for 2 years they travelled, not knowing where to keep that image in safe custody. Finally, they went to Thanjavur, where they were received with open arms by the Maratha Raja there, Tuljaji. This was in the 18th century, last quarter of the 18th century. And then this temple was built. I can give you the exact date of the building of this temple. It was 1786. And then architectural expansions came about much later. So this Bangaru Kamakshi Amman temple has grown in stature, and it is said that the priests who carried this image for 2 long years and finally came to Thanjavur, their descendants are still in charge of the temple today, and Shyama Shastri, of course, was very closely attached with this temple. And again we will hear a rendering of a beautiful song by Shyama Shastri on this temple very soon. Now I am showing you something which I am sure you will all think is bizarre. Now what is this? this is actually a stone sculpture from a place called Urayur. The Urayur we know for saris. The Urayur we know as a suburb of Tiruchirappalli. Not many of us know that the ancient name of Urayur was Koli. Therefore, this is the legendary history of the Chola Empire. There is a Koli, there is a rooster attacking an elephant, and it is said to have happened in Urayur. Therefore, it got the name Koli, and the Cholas took it as the capital. This was the original Chola capital. It was Urayur. That is between the 2nd century BC and the 3rd century AD. Urayur was the capital of the Cholas, who were a very, very small chieftaindom. They were minor powers at that point of time. And then around 850 or 870 AD, they take Thanjavur, here is Thanjavur, from another group of chieftains called the Muttarayar. And then from then they become, there is no stopping them for 400 years after that, they become the imperial Cholas. So this was how small the Chola Empire was around 850 or 900 AD, centered around Thanjavur. Madurai was nowhere in the picture. All this was Pandya area. And then in the reign of Rajaraja Chola, which is between 985 and 1014, this is how grand the empire of the imperial Cholas becomes. This is an approximate map. This is not really perfect because Rajaraja didn't conquer the whole of Kerala. Only half of it was conquered. Half of Sri Lanka, the northern part, was conquered. Vengi, this part, all that was conquered. He almost went up there, where Orissa is. The fantastic empire of the Cholas was like this. Then later on, it becomes like this in the reign of Rajendra. It becomes even bigger, and all the pinkish areas are the areas he conquered. Indonesia, Malaysia, up to Vangadesham. And Thanjavur continues to be an important town, although the capital has shifted from Thanjavur to Gangaikonda Cholapuram. But still, Thanjavur occupies an important place in Chola history. And then the empire starts to shrink post Rajendra in the reign of Kulothunga. You can see the empire has started to shrink. Thanjavur is very much in the picture. Next century. And this is what happens to the mighty Chola Empire. It started around 850-875 with Thanjavur as the nerve center. After 1279, it is heard of no more. The Pandyas come in with a vengeance. The Pandyas who had been subdued, they take over the entire Cholanadu, and Thanjavur too falls into the hands of the Pandyas. So that is the history of Thanjavur. There is more. It has not stopped yet. Later, another group of kings called the Nayaks come over, and under them, Thanjavur reaches a supreme level as far as art and culture is concerned. When the Nayaks go away, the Marathas come, and again the Maratha contribution to art and culture is something phenomenal. We'll have a short look at it. Now we are coming to what everybody is waiting for, I guess. This is the Brihadeeswara temple in Thanjavur. The original name was Rajarajeshwaram. This is one of the 4 royal temples of the Cholas. Not many history books will give you this detail. A royal temple is totally different from another temple. A royal temple is one that has the name of the king imposed on it. I use the word imposed. This is Rajaraja's temple. This is Rajarajeshwaram. And you have a line of other temples also that are like this in the Chola times, but I don't have time to go into it now. The state money was poured into this temple. All royal temples are the grandest structures of that century. You have very many of these. Now this is the Gopuram, and the Gopuram really takes form and shape in the time of the Cholas. And this is among the first large Gopurams. It is almost totally made of granite. This is the first Gopuram that you will enter. And this is one of the rare temples where the Gopuram itself has a name. In other temples you say Kerakku Vasil, the Merku Vasil, whatever. Here it has a name. It's called Keralantakan Thiruvasil. Keralantakan was a title of Rajaraja Chola. Antakan, he who destroyed Kerala. Why was he so proud of it? Because hitherto, till his time, Kerala was not at all conquered by any king from Tamil Nadu. The Western Ghats were there, the Chera kings were very strong. He was the first to go over the Western Ghats and conquer Kerala. So he was Keralantakan, so proud of the name that he gave it to the Gopuram. Till today, it is Keralantakan Thiruvasal. You go in through the Keralantakan Thiruvasal, but why are we always in haste? Why are we always running in and running out? Look what we miss when we do that. Look at this stone and this stone. They are both one piece of stone. Now, there is no stone in Thanjavur. There is absolutely not a piece of granite then and now. All this came either from Pudukottai, 35-40 kilometers away, or from Tiruchirappalli on the other side. Every single piece of granite with which the Thanjavur temples, I'm not specific about the Brihadeeswara temple alone, even the Thanjai Manamadi Kovil, etc., have been built from stone which has come from very, very long distances. Pre-electricity, pre-truck, pre-crane days. Just tell me, how did they haul the stone from so many kilometers away? How did they set it up vertically? How did they put this beam, which is also one piece of stone, on top? How did they do all this? Because we had the world's greatest engineers, that's why. Now this is the second of the Gopurams, and this goes by another title of this king. This is called the Rajarajan Thiruvasal. Now many of us are not aware that Rajaraja, that term itself is a title. The man was born Arulmozhivarman. It was much after he became king of Thanjavur that he got the title Rajaraja. It was not immediate. So this Gopuram, which is 100% made of solid granite, is called the Rajarajan Thiruvasal. So we've come in through the Keralantakan Thiruvasal, we've come in through the Rajarajan Thiruvasal, and that is how we have come in. And if you notice a color difference between the two, it is simply because of the good work of the Archaeological Survey of India, under whose care this is. They take extreme pains to see that weeds and trees do not grow from the crevices, because when the roots go deep, the entire building can be destroyed in a course of time. So we come into that, and we come into this Nandi Mantapam, which needs more explanation. I'll come to it a little later. So again, we are coming into this temple. Now this is a very good picture, also because it was not taken by me. Now these are the two Gopurams of the temple, and here you have the main Vimanam. We'll deal with that later. Now this structure that you see here, it's a small entrance, that was built by the Marathas. So you see, this temple has additions here and there and everywhere. This Gopuram is Rajarajas, this Gopuram is Rajarajas, this main Vimanam is Rajarajas. This is Maratha. So many centuries later, 800 years later, the Marathas built another gateway to this temple. So now this is how it is. This is the main Vimanam of this temple. 100% solid granite, going to a height of 60.96 meters, not feet, these are meters. You feel dwarfed, you feel insecure in front of this gigantic monument, and right on top is, no, it is not one piece of stone, it is several pieces of granite put together to look like one piece of stone, that is 100%, and that is one thing that people will tell you, it's one piece of stone, it is not. And the second thing they will tell you there, I'm not naming who, but generally they, is that the shadow does not fall, it falls, it has to fall, it is so scientific. And also here, there was another structure over here, which is completely and totally destroyed in the time of Malik Kafur, which was in 1310-1311 AD, when he came to South India on a plundering visit just for 1 year, and he destroyed a lot. So this is how it looks, this wonderful temple. This I have scanned from a book by Sri A.K. Seshadri, who was in the Archaeological Survey of India. That is the gentleman there. Now look at the size of that kalasham that is on top, the kumbham. You're very dwarfed next to it. This is an old picture, and very difficult to get this angle if you stand inside the courtyard of the temple today. This is again an outstanding watercolor image in the early part of the 19th century. Again, this landscape is all gone in Thanjavur today. This was the commemorative 1,000 rupee note that was issued for the 1,000th year of the Thanjavur temple. 1010, Rajaraja Chola consecrated this temple by giving the kalasham and placing it on top, gold kalasham. And 2010, of course, we had a grand celebration of this temple. A 5 rupee coin with the Thanjavur Vimanam has also been put here. This is the ground plan of the temple, but I won't go into it. 985 to 1014 was the reign period of Rajaraja Chola. It was towards the end of his reign that this temple was completed in Thanjavur, 1010. He lived only for 4 years after that. This temple, it may be shocking to many, is still not complete. If you look at the outer walls of the temple, it's very uneven. Much has still not been done. If you see some of the sculptures inside, and I'll come into it in detail in a few minutes, those are also not complete. So, how can a temple that is incomplete architecturally and iconographically be fit for worship? Usually it's not so. But yes, it is permitted because the agama or the code, religious code according to which this temple has been constructed and the puja offered is called the Makutagama, which permits this. That is, the deity can be consecrated and rituals can be started without it being architecturally complete. It is still architecturally incomplete, this temple. So this is how it soars up in the sky. It keeps going. Any number of photographs will not do justice to the temple. There are 3 entrances to the Garbhagriha. Now this is a cross section of the temple, which again I have scanned from A.K. Seshadri's book. And again, not many of us are aware that central part of the temple is totally hollow. It is not a solid structure. It could never be. If you had solid granite for 60.96 meters, it may have collapsed. We don't know. But these great engineers made the space inside. So if you happen to stand next to the lingam, and look straight up, you will see this portion. And then there is a narrow passage, very narrow passage, only about 5 or 6 feet in breadth here. These 2 walls are thick, 15 feet, 11 feet. They have to be so thick to bear the weight of the superstructure on top. Now between these 2 walls is this narrow passage. On the ground floor you can go around the lingam. But then and now it is meant only for VIPs. Now on the second floor also you have a circumambulatory passage, and there you find the exquisite and one of its kind series of carvings of the Karanas or the dance movements in Bharatanatyam. In the lower portion here you will find on the walls murals of the time of Rajaraja Chola himself. We'll have a glance at that. So this is how the cross section of the temple actually looks. And if you happen to stand near the linga and you look up, this is how you will see it going high up. And I have scanned this from another book. I didn't take this. Now this is the lingam. It is 11 feet in height. The lingam is solid. It is one piece of stone. It's a monolith. The linga pitam or the avadiyar is not one piece of stone. It is several pieces put together so perfectly that it looks like one piece. And that is even more difficult to do. So here, it is on this part where I am pointing that you have a series of sculptures of Shiva's different manifestations. You have Lingodbhava Murti, Harihara, very many other manifestations. On this level, the second story or the second tier is where you have dozens and dozens of only one aspect of Shiva, and that is Tripurantaka. Many of us have not even heard of this name. That is Shiva standing with a bow and arrow like Rama. Only thing is he has 4 hands and the upper 2 hands hold the axe, the parashu, and the deer or the mriga. And it is that form that Raja had totally given his heart to. So we have a whole row of Tripurantakas and nothing but Tripurantakas on top over there. So I'll just go through this a little fast. If you have a reddish color that's showing here, the rock is a little reddish, and it's also taken at a time of the day when the evening sun hit directly at it. Now we have the lighting of this temple, and it's quite by chance that this picture was taken. It looks almost golden in color. And if we put ourselves back 1,000 years, this is how the temple would have looked. You would not have had the stone color when you saw it. You would have had this golden color because Raja plated the Vimanam of this temple with gold. So now, this is an old picture. That's the moat then, full of water. This is the moat now, which is being used as a garbage dump. I'm sorry I have to bring this into the picture, but this is the reality of Thanjavur today. This is an Archaeological Survey of India protected monument. This is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. But then what can you do if the common man treats it this way? So now I showed you that inner circumambulatory passage around the lingam, and they have these wonderful Chola murals. This again is Shiva as Tripurantaka. Notice the bow, the slender bow and the quiver full of arrows. This is a 1000-year painting. Now this again is a 1000-year-old painting. This is supposed to be Rajaraja Chola and his guru Karuvur Devar. Although now there is a slight discrepancy regarding this opinion. This is a white elephant and that is a white horse. These are divine animals having been sent by Shiva to bring two of his bhaktas, Cheravan Peruman and Sundaramurti Nayanar, to Kailash. You can see that they are flying through the air. All this has been depicted on the walls. You will also see how badly these paintings are. That's because of water seepage and many other things that have happened over the centuries. Now this again is a very, very rare painting. You see Nataraja of Chidambaram over here. And this is Rajaraja and his 3 queens. 3 of his 13 queens. 3 are shown here. And this is Nataraja. You know specifically that it is from Chidambaram because this golden roof is there. The Ponkurai is there. What you do not see in this picture are the 4 gopurams in the 4 cardinal directions, which are the most eye-catching features of Chidambaram today. And the reason that you do not see them is because they were not there in the time of Rajaraja. They were built much later in the reign of his great-great-grandson. So now this is another mural found on the wall, same wall. This is a Nayak time, 17th century painting, and this is very unfortunate because it was painted directly on the Chola paintings, and very painstakingly the Archaeological Survey of India is removing it at present. These are all original Chola sculptures with original paint in that narrow circumambulatory passage. Now this, if you go to the, I showed you the paintings on the ground floor circumambulatory. If you go to the first floor, this is what you see. An entire series of dance movements called Karanas of Bharata's Natya Shastra. You see them in Chidambaram and you see them in the Sargapani Kovil in Kumbakonam. You see them in very many other places. But the greatness of this is that, first of all, this is the first time in India that the Karanas were being portrayed in hard stone. The second important thing is that they are given in the same order as the Natya Shastra of Bharata. It is not so in Chidambaram and it is not so in any other place in India. Here it is in that same sequence. If Tala Pushpakutta is the first Karana mentioned by Bharata, it is there. Now let us see. Here, the ASI has very, very nicely put these things. So this is the first Karana. And then you go in a clockwise direction like this, and you will see all the others as well. So this is how it goes. And this is the first time, and perhaps the last in India, where Shiva himself is shown depicting the Karanas. If you go to Chidambaram, it's a lady, and if you go to Chamgapani temple, it's still a controversy as to whether it is Krishna or Shiva. But this is explicitly Shiva, because in his rear arms you can see the deer and the axe. So it goes on like this. Very, very well done. And unfortunately, this entire passage was totally blocked at one point of time, and bats got in and they messed up the place. And very painstakingly, the ASI has over the years cleared it up. T.N. Ramchandran of the Archaeological Survey of India was here, K.R. Srinivasan was here, Dr. Padma Subramaniam has done great research on this. The rest is history. Now I am showing you this book of Abhinava Gupta simply to tie up Kashmir and Land's End, Tamil Nadu. Abhinava Gupta's time was almost the same time as Rajaraja Chola. Up there in Kashmir, this great scholar, Sanskrit scholar, was writing a commentary on Bharata's Natya Shastra. Then at the very same time, Rajaraja in Tamil Nadu, in Thanjavur, was asking his sculptors to carve the Karanas of Bharata's Natya Shastra. So this is a pan-Indian link that we have here. Now these are all the sculptures on the walls of the Thanjavur temple. This is Harihara, Vishnu and Shiva. This is Nataraja. I don't want to take away anything from the greatness of this temple, but I do wish to say something. If you observe very closely, you will see that in none of the sculptures can you see the image fully. If you go to any other temple in Tamil Nadu, you can see the full image. In the Thanjavur temple, no. Shiva's arms are gone inside this. there was some matter of proportion that Rajaraja sculptors seem to have missed. So in many of the sculptures, the entire carving is not very fully seen. So on the upper level, here you have Tripurantaka. And this is Shiva with bow and arrow. You have an entire series of them. Pardon me, it's slightly blurred, but this is how it is. It's at a very, very high level. Ganesha. These are the Dwarapalakas. These are huge Dwarapalakas. Uma Maheshwara, Durga, and the inscriptions of this temple. This is a mind-blowing array of inscriptions that you have here. There are more than 100 in all, out of which 60 plus belong to the time of Rajaraja Chola himself. They record donation after donation after donation given to this temple by Rajaraja Chola and his family members, his guru, Ishana Shiva Pandita. All these people have donated. Now what did they donate? It's totally mind-blowing. The Navaratna is like nothing at all. This Navaratna, that Navaratna, this gold, that silver, and also 66 images. Not just Panchaloha, but pure silver, gold, etc. were given by Rajaraja and his family to the temple, and there are only 2 left in the temple today among 60 odd images that were given. That's another story. But now, what is it, the inscriptions actually tell you is which icon, which Vigraha was donated by whom, and the exact details, the size, etc., etc. Everything is clearly given. And then the longest inscription in this temple talks about the donation of 400 Tadipendir, Devadasis, dancers to this temple. And details of all the names, 400 names are given, from where they came is given. 50 dancers from Thiruvayyaru, 1 dancer from Pandanallur, 1 from here, 1 from there, but not 1 from Chidambaram. Does it mean that Chidambaram didn't have dancers? No. It only means that Nataraja was the Kuladaivam of the Chola rulers, and they did not want to transfer a dancer from their great temple to Thanjavur, whereas from all the other temples they transferred dancers. It's like, transferring government officials today. And they were all made to dance in the Thanjavur temple. All 400 names are given. The salaries, whatever allowance given to them are given. And where they stayed, there were 2 separate streets set apart for the dancers to stay. Each street had 2 rows of houses. Each row had 100 houses. So there you have 400 houses for the dancers. Terms of retirement, terms of employment, everything is given in these inscriptions. There is nothing that has escaped the attention of Rajaraja. But I also want to say one more thing. I told you this temple was built in 1010 and so many endowments were made subsequently. Rajaraja died in 1014. So most of the endowments that had been made in the life of Rajaraja were inscribed on the walls by his son and successor Rajendra when he was still in Thanjavur and before he left Thanjavur to shift his capital to Gangaikonda Cholapuram. The son took on the work of inscribing the donations of his father. And one more thing I would like to add is the important inscriptions are those of Rajaraja, naturally. The second in importance are not his son and successor, that very great heir apparent Yuvaraja Rajendra. No, it was Rajaraja's elder sister Kundavai, whom he regarded as a mother because his own mother passed away very early. Now Kundavai's inscription and Rajaraja's inscription alone are inscribed in the most important place of the temple, that is the Vimana itself. That is around the Garbhagriha of the temple at eye level, where everybody could read. All his queens, his son, his army general, his guru, all their inscriptions are elsewhere. Only Kundavais and Rajarajas are there. And that's very, very touching. All this is Tamil. This is Tamil alphabet, but 1000 years old. And this language, the script has evolved over the centuries. So many of us may not be able to read the inscription fully. I just want to touch upon this, which is very important as far as this temple is concerned. We all know of the Periya Puranam that contains the hymns of life histories of the Nayanmars, and I'm showing it to you for a very, very particular reason. That is, Rajaraja wanted to collect the hymns, the Devaram hymns of Appar Sundarar and Sambandar, most of which had been lost before his time. Only a few were there, and they were being sung in temples, and Rajaraja had heard them. He was also fully aware that there were many more, but he did not know where they were. So he took the advice of a mystic young boy saint called Nambi Andar Nambi from a place called Tirunarayur, which is near Chidambaram. And that mystic saint, with his mental powers, saw that all the Devaram hymns were lying in a closed room, locked room, in the western prakara of the Chidambaram temple. So Rajaraja and Nambi Andar Nambi rushed to Chidambaram. They found the room, it was locked, and they wanted to break it. But the Deekshithars of the temple told Rajaraja, they told the emperor of entire South India that he could not break it. He said that privilege rests only with the creators of the hymns. That is Appar Sundarar and Samandar. So what was Rajaraja to do? He made bronze images of the three saints. And with all due honor, he brought them to that place. And the lock broke open and they were able to go inside. But to their horror, to their joy and to their horror, they found that the manuscripts were there with the hymns written on them, the Devarams were there, but most of them had been swallowed by termites. But what few were there, Rajaraja managed to salvage. Not only did he get them back safely, he set them to tune. And he made people sing them in the Thanjavur Movie and in many other temples in South India. And that is the Devaram tradition, the Oduva tradition that we have today. So it is entirely due to Rajaraja and Nambi Andar Nambi and the big temple in Thanjavur that we have this tradition. So now coming to this Nandi, and I'll stop in a few minutes. This is not from the 10th, 11th century. This does not belong to Rajaraja's period. This big monolithic Rishabha was brought in by the Nayak rulers in the 17th century. This Mantapam is also a 17th century Mantapam. Let's look at it. Look at the lovely murals on top. We miss seeing them. These are all of the 17th century. This is how this is the original Nandi of Rajaraja Chola. It is there in one corner, and this is, according to art historians, far more beautiful than the chunky Nandi who's sitting there in the center. Now, if you look up from at the ceiling of the Nandi Mandapa, this is what you will see. These are paintings. This is Balakrishna inside a full-blown lotus, and the detailing is absolutely amazing. This comes from about 350 years ago, but unfortunately most of the murals have been lost to us today. This is the prakaram of this, this is the compound wall of this temple. This is the Thirumadil or the Thirushutru Madigai, and this is not just another one. This has lovely mantapas, and this was built by an army general, Dandanayaka of Rajaraja, called Krishnan Raman. Even these details are given. But if you look at inside, there are a huge number of lingas that have been consecrated, and those belong to the Maratha times. This is the Subramanya Swami temple. This is Nayak period, 17th century. I'll go through the slides a bit fast because I know I'm running out of time. This is Muruga. These are all sculptures that you have from the 17th century over here. This is just a water spout to drain the Abhisheka Jala, and this is made so beautifully just by looking at this thing which takes away the Abhisheka Tirtha. You can date a temple. These are the Dwarapalakas of the Subramanya Swami shrine. It's highly polished. This polish you don't find in the Chola period, you find only 6 centuries, 7 centuries later. There is so much difference. Now this entire Muruga shrine is shaped like a chariot. And the Nayaks were so desperately trying to copy a Chola tradition. You see this in Darasuram, you see this in Melakadambur, you see this in many other Chola temples. Completely and totally they have incorporated it. An untrained eye will see no difference between the Subramanya shrine and the main Vimana. But a trained eye will see a million differences. Now this is the Ganesha shrine. This is Maratha period, 1 century after the Subramanya temple. If you had, in your mind's eye, if you can have a vision of the Thanjavur temple in the Rajaraja's time, it would have been very simple. 2 Gopurams, 1 small Nandi Mantapam, compound wall, and the towering Vimana, full stop. The Brihannayaki shrine was built, ironically, by the enemies of the Cholas, the Pandyas. The Pandyas came in with a vengeance in the 13th century, completely destroyed the Chola Empire, burnt the palace in Thanjavur, killed the last Chola king, but made a contribution to the Thanjavur temple by way of the Ambal shrine, the Brihadeeswara shrine, which is 300 years after Rajaraja built that main Vimanam. And you will hear a lovely song by Muthuswami Dikshidhar on Brihadeeswara, rendered by Mrs. Vijayalakshmi very, very soon. So this is that one. Now this is the Maratha gateway that is there. I would like to end my lecture with this wonderful bronze image. This is a Nataraja. This is only one of the two bronze images of which the inscriptions talk about. Now this is Rajaraja's own contribution, his own donation to this temple, and such was his bhakti, I think, that although other images have gone away over time, this one has remained. It is still in active worship. Now how do you know that this is the image that Rajaraja donated? There is no inscription here on this thing to say that Rajaraja donated it. You have to go back to the stone inscription. If you weigh this image, if you measure the height, the inscription says that is the image that Rajaraja gave to this temple. And then there is something even more nice. On the pedestal here is a short Sanskrit verse, and that belongs to around 1855 AD when the Marathas were ruling. There was this lady called Kamakshi Bai, who was the wife of the last Maratha emperor Shivaji III, before the British took over by the doctrine of lapse. And she says, I found, very sweetly she says, I found that this image was damaged. So I got a sculptor by name Nagarajan and asked him to repair it. And she gives the year, the date, it was Paurnami, she gives every Tithi, Nakshatram, everything she says. And it is there right at the back. And on close observation, archaeologists have found that even the place where it has been repaired is very obvious. The rest of the image is copper, only that repaired portion is Panchaloha. So this is Rajaraja's lasting legacy to this temple. You have the Thanjavur Quartet, you had Arunagirinathar coming in, you have Karur Devar's hymns, you have the Pashurams. The list is endless. There is also a temple for Govindaraja Perumal over here, about which Dikshidhar has sung, and you will hear Vijayalakshmi Subramaniam rendering a song, that same song there. How can you compress Thanjavur into 45 minutes? It's impossible. Thank you very much.